Have you ever noticed how the last week of a month feels different from all the others? Not busier, not shorter, different. Like the air itself is asking you a question you haven't answered yet. Some people feel it in July, right before August arrives. A quiet pressure behind the ribs, a sense that something is ending, even though nothing has technically happened. No phone call, no headline, no single dramatic event, just a feeling. If you have ever lain awake at 2 a.m., staring at a ceiling that offered no answers, running through everything you should have done differently, this is for you. If you have ever smiled in a room full of people, while quietly wondering if anyone would notice if you disappeared for a while, this is for you. And if you have ever asked, in the silence after everyone else has gone to sleep, is this really it? Is this the whole story of my life? Then what you are about to hear was built for exactly this moment. But that's only part of the story. Because there is something almost every culture on Earth has quietly agreed on, across thousands of years, without ever comparing notes. Ancient monks in stone monasteries, farmers watching the sky, physicists studying particles too small to see, grieving parents, exhausted new mothers, old men on park benches feeding pigeons, waiting for nothing in particular. They all arrived, from wildly different lives, at the same strange conclusion. Some people believe the truth is sitting so close to you right now that you have stopped being able to see it. The way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator or the weight of your own shoes. Tonight, we are going to try to see it again. Let's start with a story. Not a myth, not a legend, something closer to home. Picture a woman, we'll call her Elena, though she could be anyone, she could be you, standing in a kitchen that smells like burnt toast and unpaid bills. It's July 29th. She has just closed her laptop after reading, for the 4th time, the email that says the promotion went to someone else. She isn't devastated. That's the strange part. She's numb. Numbness, it turns out, is often more dangerous than heartbreak, because heartbreak at least announces itself. Numbness just sits there, quietly rearranging your life while you're not looking. Elena had a plan once. Everyone does, when they're young enough to believe plans survive contact with reality. Hers involved a corner office, a life that looked from the outside like proof that she mattered. Instead, she got Tuesdays. Ordinary, unphotogenic Tuesdays, one after another, for years. What happened next surprised everyone, including Elena herself. She didn't quit her job. She didn't move to a different country or fall in love with a stranger on a train. Nothing that would make a good movie poster happened at all. She simply stopped one evening and asked herself a question she had been avoiding for a decade. What if the plan was never the point? Many people believe that the moment right before everything changes looks exactly like the moment right before nothing changes. There is no dividing line, no trumpet sound, just an ordinary Tuesday and a question asked honestly for the first time. Here is where the mystery begins to open, just a crack. Across centuries, in places that never spoke to one another, the deserts of Egypt, the mountains of Tibet, the coastlines of Ireland, the plains where indigenous elders taught by firelight, a strange pattern shows up again and again in the stories people tell about the moment their life changed. Not one sign, 3. The first sign is silence. Not the absence of noise, but a sudden inability to keep pretending. The distractions stop working, the scrolling, the overworking, the noise you used to drown out the question. None of it holds anymore. The second sign is a stranger's sentence. A single line, spoken by someone who has no idea what it means to you, that lands like it was written specifically for your life. A cashier, a child, a voice on the radio. Something so small that if you weren't paying attention, you would miss it entirely. The third sign is the dream you keep almost remembering. The one that wakes you gently instead of violently. No falling, no chasing, just a feeling you can't shake, like your mind is trying to hand you something and you keep dropping it before your hands close around it. Elena had all three that same week. She didn't know it yet. Most people don't until they look back. The final piece changes everything, but we are not there yet. Not close. Because before the hidden truth can arrive, something has to happen first. Something almost everyone tries to avoid. Let's be honest with each other for a moment. Growth doesn't look like the posters. It doesn't look like a woman doing yoga on a beach at sunrise. It looks like arguments you didn't win, diagnoses you didn't expect, friendships that quietly dissolved and left you wondering what you did wrong, money that didn't stretch far enough, love that left, sometimes gently, sometimes not. Some interpret these seasons, the ones we spend most of our lives trying to escape, as proof that something is broken in us. But consider the possibility that it's the opposite. Think about a seed for a moment. Before it becomes anything green or growing, it sits in complete darkness, surrounded by pressure, cracking open in a way that, if it could feel, would probably resemble pain. No sunlight reaches it there. No one applauds it. It doesn't know, in that darkness, that it's becoming anything at all. It just knows the old shape isn't holding anymore. Many people believe this is not a flaw in how life works, but the actual mechanism of it, that the breaking is not separate from the becoming, that the two are somehow the same event, viewed from two different points in time. This doesn't mean pain is good. It doesn't mean suffering should be sought out or romanticized. It means something quieter and, in its own way, more useful. That the story isn't over just because this chapter is dark. Elena spent that August in the dark chapter. Not dramatically. Nobody staged an intervention. Nobody wrote a song about it. She just went to work, came home, and sat with the question she'd finally allowed herself to ask. What if the plan was never the point? But that's only part of the story. Because somewhere in that ordinary darkness, something in her had already begun to shift. She just couldn't see it yet. None of us can while we're still inside it. Here's where the psychology gets interesting, and a little uncomfortable. There is a peculiar trick the human mind plays on almost everyone. Psychologists have a name for pieces of it: negativity bias, rumination, the spotlight effect. But underneath the clinical language is something simpler. We are extraordinarily good at overthinking our way past the very things we're looking for. Fear disguises itself as caution. Impatience disguises itself as ambition. Overthinking disguises itself as being responsible. And all three of them, working together, can make a person walk right past an open door without ever seeing it, because they were too busy scanning the walls for a door that looked the way they expected a door to look. Imagine if the opportunity you've been waiting for has already arrived. Not in the future, not next month, not after August ends. Already. And imagine if the only reason you haven't noticed is that you were told somewhere along the way that important things always arrive with fanfare, so you stopped paying attention to the quiet ones. Elena's stranger's sentence came from a man restocking apples at a grocery store. She'd asked, out of pure habit, "How's your day going?" And he'd said, without looking up, "Every day I don't quit is a day I get better at this. Funny thing is, I used to hate this job. Now I run 3 of these." He wasn't talking to her, not really, but something in her chest went very still. What happened next surprised everyone. She didn't run home and write a business plan. She didn't have an epiphany in the produce aisle. She just carried that sentence with her for 3 days, the way you'd carry a stone in your pocket. Not because it was useful, but because you couldn't quite put it down. One way to look at this is that the mirror was never hidden. It was hanging exactly where it had always hung. She had simply never stood still long enough in front of it to actually look. Let's talk for a moment about what happens to the people who never ask the question at all. Not because they're weaker or less deserving or less loved, simply because life is loud, and asking requires a kind of stillness that modern life makes almost impossible to find. Consider the possibility that the real danger was never change. The real danger was the slow, comfortable accumulation of small avoidances. The difficult conversation postponed one more week, the dream quietly downgraded to a someday, the apology never given, the risk never taken. Until one day, years later, a person looks up and doesn't recognize the life surrounding them. Not because it went wrong, because it never really started. This is the quiet tragedy so few documentaries talk about. Not the dramatic collapse, but the gentle, undramatic drift. The version of a person who kept choosing the familiar over the alive, until the choosing became a habit too deep to notice. Elena had watched this happen to people she loved. An uncle who talked about traveling for 30 years and never left the state. A friend who kept saying, "When things settle down," until things simply never did. She didn't want to become the someday version of herself. The final piece changes everything, and we are almost there. But first, one more turn. Because the truth, when it finally arrives, rarely arrives the way we expect. Here is the twist almost no one sees coming, even though, in hindsight, it was always right in front of them. Some interpret the phrase life-changing moment as something that happens to you. A phone call, a diagnosis, a stranger, an accident. And sometimes, yes, life does arrive uninvited and rearranges everything in a single afternoon. But far more often, quietly, almost embarrassingly often, the life-changing moment is not something that happens to you. It's a decision you make about something that already happened. The silence, the stranger's sentence, the half-remembered dream. None of these were the truth itself. They were only signs, pointing, the way an old signpost points, weathered and half-illegible, toward a truth that was always going to require Elena to walk the rest of the way herself. Many people believe this is the part that gets lost in translation whenever these stories get retold, that the miracle isn't the sign. The miracle is what a person chooses to do after the sign, when no one is watching, when there's no proof it will work, when it would be so much easier to go back to scrolling. Elena's turn came on the last night of July. Not a thunderclap, a notebook, a kitchen table, and a single sentence she wrote down almost against her will. I have been waiting for permission that was never going to come from anyone but me. She sat with that sentence for a long time, long enough for the tea beside her to go cold, long enough to cry a little, not from sadness, but from the strange relief of finally putting language around something she'd carried wordlessly for years. So here it is, the truth this entire journey has been circling, the way a bird circles before it finally lands. It isn't a secret formula. It isn't a prophecy about August or any month at all. It's simpler than that. And, if we're honest, a little harder to hear than a prophecy would be, because it asks something of us instead of promising us something. Some people believe the hidden truth is this. The version of your life you are waiting to begin has been waiting on you, not the other way around. Not a version that requires you to become a different person. Not a version stitched together from someone else's timeline, someone else's definition of enough. The version that was always yours, quieter maybe than you imagined, slower, built out of ordinary Tuesdays instead of cinematic turning points. One way to look at this is that every closed door you've ever stood in front of was never a punishment. It was a redirection. Not always kind in the moment, not always fair, but a redirection nonetheless, toward a door you hadn't noticed yet, because you were too busy staring at the one that wouldn't open. Elena didn't get the corner office. She didn't get the applause she thought she needed. What she got, eventually, was smaller and stranger and far more durable. A life she recognized as her own, built slowly, out of decisions nobody else witnessed. That is the part almost no one shows you. Transformation, when it's real, rarely looks like a finish line. It looks like a Tuesday that feels, for reasons you can't quite explain, lighter than the Tuesday before it. If you have made it this far, something in you was already listening for this before you pressed play. That isn't a coincidence worth dismissing. That's worth sitting with. Consider the possibility that whatever silence has been following you lately isn't emptiness. It might be space, the kind that has to open up before something new can be built inside it. Consider the possibility that the sentence someone said to you recently, the one that's still echoing for reasons you can't quite explain, wasn't random. Consider the possibility that the dream you keep almost remembering is trying to hand you something you've been ready for longer than you think. None of this is a guarantee. No one can promise you that August will look different, or that next month holds a revelation with your name on it. Life doesn't work on those kinds of schedules, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But many people believe this. The door is rarely locked. It's usually just unopened. And the only person who has ever been able to open it, in every one of these stories, from Elena's kitchen table to the ancient stories told around fires thousands of years ago, was the person standing in front of it. Not a stranger, not fate, not a perfect alignment of circumstances. Just someone, ordinary and afraid and tired, who decided to turn the handle anyway. So we return to where we began, to that quiet pressure behind the ribs, to the feeling that something is ending, even though nothing dramatic has happened yet. Maybe that feeling isn't a warning. Maybe it never was. Maybe it's an invitation, the same invitation Elena received on an ordinary Tuesday, the same one offered in some form to everyone who has ever stood at the edge of a month, year, a decade, wondering if they've run out of chances to become who they were meant to be. You haven't. Here is the question we'll leave you with, the one worth carrying into whatever comes after this video ends. If nothing dramatic has to happen for your life to change, if it only takes one honest question, asked in an ordinary kitchen, on an ordinary night, what question have you been avoiding? Sit with that. Not tonight necessarily, but soon. If this message resonated with you, share the lesson that changed your perspective with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the sign someone else needs is a sentence you didn't even know you were carrying. And if you take nothing else from these 30 minutes, take this. The life you are waiting for is not hiding from you. You are simply standing in front of a door you forgot was always meant to open from your side. Before August begins, maybe the truth was never hidden at all. Maybe it was only waiting for you to stop looking so hard and start looking closer.